My name is Isolde Maren, and at 68, I've learned that silence can say more than fury ever could. I'm not rich, not remarkable, but I've always been steady numbers, order, responsibility. After 40 years as an accountant, you get used to balance sheets that make sense. People, though they never balance, especially family. The afternoon sun pressed against the windshield of my husband's old Volvo as I turned into the vineyard. The gate gleamed white, draped in roses. Beyond it, laughter floated through the air, my son's laughter. I parked at the edge of the gravel drive, straightened the navy dress I'd chosen carefully, and took a breath that trembled more than I wanted to admit. In my purse was the invitation, printed on embossed ivory paper I'd paid to have made. Guests glanced my way as I walked up the path. Faces I recognized, friends of Rowan's. Business partners of the Delcourts smiled uncertainly, their gazes darting between my dress and the polished cars lined nearby. I caught whispers. I kept walking. Then I saw him, my only son, standing at the gate in his tuxedo, boutonniere perfectly pinned. He looked like his father for a second, before the expression changed. His jaw tightened. His hands went into his pockets. "Mom," he said quietly, "you weren't supposed to come." At first, I thought I'd misheard. "Excuse me." His eyes didn't lift from the gravel. "Marina's family, they wanted a smaller ceremony. It's complicated. Please just leave before people notice." For a moment, everything inside me stilled the music, the voices, even the breeze. I looked at the gate behind him, the flowers, the ribbon I'd bought for the florist when Marina said the budget was tight. I felt no tears, only the strange calm that comes when you finally stop pretending you belong. I smiled, adjusted the strap of my purse, and said, "That's fine, Rowan. But before I go, check your phone." He frowned. "What?" "Just check it." Then I turned and walked back toward the car, the crunch of gravel under my shoes mixing with the first faint buzz of his notifications, soft, persistent, and growing louder as the vineyard began to quiet. And 2 weeks earlier, the first sign of all this had arrived with a phone call I'll never forget. The call came on a Thursday afternoon while I was trimming the lilac bushes behind the house. I didn't recognize the number, but it had a Seattle area code. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered, cheerful without thinking, "Mrs. Maren." "Hi, it's Marina." Her voice was gentle, polished, the kind that comes from years of private schooling. I'd always liked her, or at least wanted to. "Hello, dear," I said. "Everything all right with the caterer Rowan mentioned?" "It's nothing urgent," she interrupted, too quickly. "It's just about the wedding." The pause that followed was long enough to hear my heartbeat. "My parents and I have been finalizing the guest list," she continued, her words chosen like porcelain. "It's complicated, but they think your presence might make things a little awkward for them. They're used to a certain, standard." I stood perfectly still, pruning shears hanging uselessly from my hand. "Awkward," I repeated. "I hope you understand." Marina said softly, "Rowan agrees it might be easier this way." Easier. The word landed heavier than any insult could. I thanked her for calling, because manners outlast everything, then hung up before my voice could betray me. The rest of the day moved like water through cracks, quiet, unstoppable. Rowan didn't call that night, nor the next. When I tried reaching him, the call went to voicemail after one ring. By Sunday, I stopped trying. That evening, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, where my late husband once balanced our books with a sharpened pencil and a tired smile. I pulled out his old leather ledger, creased, reliable, and began to list the things I'd paid for over the years. College tuition, first car, apartment deposit, business startup, wedding venue deposit. The columns added up neatly, the way numbers always do when truth refuses to hide. The ink bled slightly under the kitchen light, blurring the sum until it looked almost merciful. I closed the ledger and placed my hand on its worn cover. The house was quiet, except for the clock ticking beside the refrigerator. Each second sounded like a decision forming. By the time the tea went cold, I knew exactly what I would do next. The call came just after breakfast the following Monday. I'd been sorting receipts at the kitchen table, the same way I used to help clients close their quarter, every page in order, every total exact. The phone vibrated against a stack of envelopes. "Mrs. Maren," the familiar voice said. "This is Maurice Tran from Pacific West Bank. How are you this morning?" Maurice had handled my accounts for over 20 years. He was young when I first met him, nervous in a suit 2 sizes too big, but he'd grown into a kind, precise man, the sort who still called to confirm details in person. "I'm fine." "Maurice," I said, though my throat felt tight. "What can I do for you? I just wanted to verify a series of transfers scheduled under your signature." "The Delcourt Wedding Fund." "Correct. The final payments come to 62,000 venue, catering, honeymoon balance, some printing costs." He paused. Professional, but gentle. "Do you authorize these payments?" The air in the kitchen thinned. I could almost hear the faint ticking of my husband's old wall clock, the same one that had marked our evenings together while we built a life penny by penny. "Numbers tell stories. Issy," he used to say, "make sure yours ends clean." I looked down at my hands, steady, practical hands that had raised a son and paid for everything he'd ever dreamed of. There was a time when saying yes came automatically. But now, all I could see was Marina's voice in that careful tone. "They're used to a certain standard. Maurice," I said slowly, "I need to review those transactions before they go out." "Of course," he replied. "Should I hold them?" "Yes, hold everything." I heard the faint click of keys, a soft confirmation tone. "No problem. Mrs. Maren, nothing will move without your approval." When the line went quiet, I stayed there a moment longer, the morning light glancing off the ledger on my table. I closed it carefully, drew a single breath, and felt the first small pulse of control return to me. 2 days after the call from Maurice, I took the streetcar downtown for the first time in months. The city had that sharp spring brightness that makes everything look honest, too honest, sometimes. I carried my husband's old leather portfolio in my bag, the one with his initials embossed in fading gold. The office of Edgar Voss hadn't changed in 20 years. Same walnut shelves. Same smell of paper and coffee that had steeped into the carpet. Edgar had been my husband's attorney and our friend. When he saw me at the door, he stood at once, his voice warm with recognition. "Isolde, it's been too long. It has," I said, taking the chair across from his desk. "I need to update my will." He nodded slowly, waiting as I opened the folder and laid out a sheet of paper filled with neat handwriting. Every figure, every account, every detail. "I want to establish a scholarship fund," I said. "The Clara Maren Scholarship for young women studying accounting or finance, full tuition, renewable yearly." Edgar's brows lifted. "And Rowan, he'll be removed as beneficiary," I said evenly. "I've supported him long enough. It's time the ledger balanced." He studied me over his glasses. "This will cause a storm. You know, it's about time he learned where the roof comes from. We worked through the documents for an hour." My signature flowed smoothly, one after another on the will, on the fund paperwork, on the revocation of co-signed loans I had guaranteed years ago when Rowan started his business. The last form was a credit card closure, the one tied to his joint account. As Edgar gathered the pages, he hesitated. "You're sure about this?" I folded my hands over my lap. "I'm sure." He closed a door long before I did, outside. The air smelled of rain. I walked down Main Street with the wind at my back, the folder lighter than I remembered. By the time I reached the station, I no longer felt like a mother waiting to be invited in. I felt like a woman finally auditing her own life. The vineyard glowed like a postcard. That evening, strings of gold lights draped between oak trees. Waiters carrying champagne on silver trays. I parked my car across the road, far enough to stay unseen, but close enough to watch through the open veranda. The laughter carried easily through the cool air. Inside, the Dell courts looked perfectly arranged. Marina's mother, Evelyn Delcourt, stood at the center of the table, her voice bright and smooth like the glass she held. She was elegant, practiced every gesture rehearsed, every compliment polished. I told the planner we needed to keep the guest list refined, she said, smiling at the guests. Weddings set the tone for a marriage. You can't mix circles that don't belong together. The table laughed softly, even from where I sat. I could see Rowan's shoulders tense. He nodded at something Evelyn said. A small, tight smile fixed on his face. I'd seen that expression before when he was 12 and lied about a broken window to impress the neighbor's son. That same nervous pride. The fear of being less. For a moment, I almost wanted to knock on the glass, to remind him where he came from, to remind him that his father built a business from a desk in our dining room, not from someone else's wealth. But I stayed still. A waiter leaned in to refill glasses. Marina touched Rowan's arm, laughing softly at something her father whispered. From here, they looked like a perfect photograph, one that didn't need me in the frame. I stayed until the lights dimmed and the music softened, then started the car. Portland's night swallowed the road ahead, reflections of city lights stretching like ribbons over the wet asphalt. I turned down the radio and let the quiet fill the car. My hands rested steady on the wheel, but my chest ached in ways I couldn't quite name. He learned silence from me. I murmured to the windshield, my voice barely more than breath. But for the wrong things, the road wound downhill toward home, and I let it carry me into the dark. The music faltered just as I reached the car. A breeze swept through the vines, carrying a hum that wasn't part of the string quartet. It was digital, sharp the layered sound of phones vibrating across linen-covered tables. From the corner of my eye, I saw Rowan pull his phone from his pocket. His smile froze mid-sentence. The screen lit up again and again, emails, alerts, bank notifications. He frowned, scrolling fast. Marina leaned over, confusion tightening her jaw. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice too loud in the stillness. He didn't answer right away. The officiant hesitated at the altar, whispering to the coordinator. Guests exchanged uncertain glances, their small talk dissolving into silence. Across the terrace, Graham Delcourt's voice rose, low but heated. "What do you mean the payment didn't clear?" The vineyard manager, a kind man named Mr. Klein, held up his clipboard with practiced calm. "I'm sorry, sir, but the transfer was withdrawn this morning by the account holder. The balance is unsettled." "That's impossible," Graham snapped. "This entire event was prepaid." "Not anymore," Klein replied. Checking his phone, our finance department confirmed reversal at 10:47 a.m. I watched Graham's expression shift from arrogance to disbelief to anger. Marina's face went pale under the bridal makeup. She gripped Rowan's sleeve, whispering something urgent. He opened another notification. Venue transaction declined. Honeymoon booking voided. Card closed. He looked up toward the gate, searching the path where I'd been standing moments earlier, but I was already halfway down the gravel drive. Behind me, the calm veneer of wealth began to crack. The string quartet stopped playing. Guests whispered in nervous clusters. One of the Delcourt relatives pulled out her own phone. eyes widening at whatever she saw. Marina's voice broke through the murmur. "Rowan, tell me this isn't your mother." He didn't reply. His phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen, and I saw his shoulders sag. The posture of a man who suddenly understood, who had kept the floor under his feet all along. The wind shifted, carrying a faint echo of the vineyard's fountain. I kept walking. My heels pressed small, deliberate marks into the gravel. The sound measured, almost rhythmic. At the end of the path, the last light of afternoon spilled over the vines, painting everything gold. I reached for the car door, glanced once toward the terrace, and saw the moment the perfect picture shattered. Then I stepped inside and drove away. By the time I reached the main road, the vineyard behind me was no longer echoing with music. It was noise now, disjointed voices. The kind that fill a room when people realize their comfort has a price tag. Inside. The ceremony had frozen mid-step. The officiant stood awkwardly by the altar, holding his folder against his chest. The venue manager, Mr. Kine, cleared his throat, voice steady but firm. "I'm sorry, everyone," he said, projecting just enough to reach the front rows. "We can't proceed without cleared payment." The murmur spread like wind across tall grass. Guests whispered into their phones, exchanging half-truths and startled glances. Marina's father, Graham Delcourt, flushed red, gesturing toward his son-in-law-to-be. "My daughter's wedding," he barked, "is not being stopped over a banking error." "It's not an error, sir," Klein replied. The account holder withdrew authorization. "We have documentation." Rowan stood very still. The color drained from his face as the realization settled in his mother's quiet finances had built this day. Not the Delcourt's fortune. The car, the catering, the rings, everything had flowed through that one account he'd never asked about because he'd never needed to. Marina turned on him, disbelief twisting her expression. "You told me your mother was just helping a little. You said your firm covered the rest." I thought he stammered, then stopped. There was nothing left to say. Evelyn Delcourt fanned herself, her composure cracking. "We have guests from Seattle, from Palm Springs. Do something." Graham, before he could answer, another voice rose from the side terrace. The caterer, a man in a white jacket with a clipboard in hand. "Excuse me. Sir, my staff just received confirmation. Our contract was canceled last night at 8:02 p.m. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Trays of untouched champagne stood abandoned on linen tables. Marina's bouquet slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Rowan stared at the ring on his finger as if it belonged to someone else. Around him, the perfect image unraveled, flowers wilting in the heat. Guests slipping away in silence, and the weight of one truth pressing down. Everything had been borrowed, and the lender had finally closed the account. By the time the first car engine started, the wedding had already ceased to exist. Only the echo of it remained, and the quiet shame of those who'd built their celebration on someone else's generosity. I had almost reached the highway when I saw him in the rearview mirror, Rowan running down the drive. Tuxedo jacket half unbuttoned, dust rising behind his shoes. Against my better judgment, I slowed the car and pulled into the gravel lot near the fence. He reached me breathless, hands on his knees, face streaked with sweat and disbelief. "Why would you do this? Mom," he gasped. "Why would you humiliate me like this?" I leaned against the car door, feeling the old metal warm beneath my palm. "I didn't humiliate you," I said quietly. "I just stopped paying for your illusion." He stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. "You could have talked to me. We could have fixed it." "I tried," I said. "Every call, every message you ignored. You wanted to be their kind of man, and you almost pulled it off until the bill came due." He took a step closer, his voice trembling. "You've ruined everything. Marina's parents will never, Marina's parents were never going to accept me. I interrupted. They just wanted what came from my account, not from my heart. He opened his mouth, but the words faltered. The anger in his face gave way to something smaller. Fear, maybe, or shame. Please, he whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted them to be proud of me. I sighed. You wanted a family without me. Now you have one without my money, too. The wind lifted a lock of his hair, and for a brief second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who ran home with scraped knees, clutching drawings for the fridge. That boy would have known how to say thank you. He reached for the door handle. Can't we start over? I shook my head. Not yet. You haven't started over yourself. For a moment, he stood there, silent, then stepped back. I started the engine. The sound broke the still air between us. As I turned onto the road, the vineyard disappeared in the mirror, shrinking into a blur of gold and dust. Rowan stood alone in the parking lot, tuxedo sleeves hanging loose, watching the car until it vanished from sight. Winter settled over Portland like a soft gray shawl. The garden behind my house looked smaller in the cold light, but the lavender still stood, brittle and brave, beneath a dusting of frost. I'd learned to keep the soil turned even when nothing seemed to grow. It made spring easier to believe in. The mail arrived later than usual that morning, the envelope tucked among catalogs and utility bills. I recognized the handwriting, immediately neat, deliberate, too careful, as if every word might be its last chance. I sat by the kitchen window, steam rising from my tea, and opened it. Mom, it began. I've moved out of the Delcourt's place. Marina and I separated 2 months ago. It turns out we wanted different kinds of lives. She wanted to stay in their world. I needed to earn mine. The paper carried the faint smell of sawdust. He wrote about a renovation company he'd joined. Long hours, but honest work. He said he was learning to live within what he made, to balance ledgers that no longer needed my hand. I understand now what you were trying to teach me. The next line read, that money given without gratitude becomes permission, not love. I'm sorry for how long it took to see that. I hope you're well. The words blurred slightly where the ink had pressed too deep. I folded the letter along its natural creases and opened the drawer where I kept my husband's old ledger. Between its pages, where the columns of numbers had ended, I slipped the paper inside, outside. The wind moved gently through the dry branches, shaking loose a few frozen leaves. I watched them fall, slow and quiet, until they disappeared into the soil. Then I reached for my coat, stepped into the chill, and began trimming back the dead stems, making room for whatever might grow next. Spring returned to the Willamette Valley in slow colors, green first, then gold, then the soft blush of vines waking after winter. The vineyard looked different now. The old sign had been replaced by one that read, the Isolde Maren Foundation Gala. I arrived early, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes just as it had that other afternoon, though the air felt lighter this time. Volunteers moved between tables, arranging white tulips in glass vases. The event would raise funds for scholarships single mothers returning to school, women who had learned, as I once did, to build stability from silence. Inside the hall, laughter drifted easily. A jazz trio played something slow, kind. I stood near the balcony, letting the evening light brush against the edge of my sleeve, when I heard a voice behind me. Mom. Rowan stood there, dressed simply in a gray suit. No tie, no pretense. Time had softened him. He held a small envelope in his hand. I wanted to give you this, he said. Inside was a personal check, $5,000. The note on the memo line read first repayment. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, I saw not the boy who disappointed me, nor the man who forgot me, but someone quietly trying to rebuild. I checked my phone that day, he said, his voice low. I've been checking my conscience ever since. I smiled faintly. Then maybe we're finally balanced. He nodded, eyes glistening, and together we turned toward the terrace. The sun had begun to set behind the vines, spilling its gold over everything it touched. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to look back. The light was enough.